It was a horseshoe-shaped boomerang with a little dome on top. The three lights combined to one spot on the field, and I could see it. You know, I'm driving 65. There's no cars on the freeway. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm looking at a UFO. And then I look over at my former girlfriend and I say, hey, take a look at that. And then it whoosh, came straight over. And the thing that was so wild about that is that when I said, take a look at that, it heard me and came over after the end of my sentence. Now it's flying next to my U-Haul, less than maybe 10 feet away.
Well, thanks, man. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful to have you and hear about your experiences. Did you have experiences when you were young, or is this something that just happened later in life?
I would say that I was not aware of anything as a child. Growing up, I had a pretty rough childhood. My dad left when I was 4. And, I'd say the only real paranormal thing that happened to me as a child that I have no explanation for is in 1989, I believe it was October 17th, is when the big earthquake happened in the Bay Area. And I was actually on the roof of my house 5 seconds before the earthquake hit. And I got
Whoa.
scared like I've never been scared before. And I had been playing on that roof for months before that when my mom wasn't paying attention. And I ran downstairs after something spooked me. And then I watched the earthquake actually happen. So that was kind of the only real like near death experience where I had some kind of forethought that maybe there was a guardian angel or something, but never. My mom always told me that she saw a UFO in Greece. My mom is 76, so this is a long time ago in the 60s. She said she saw a light moving around and it was making angles, and she tried to talk to all of these people on this mountaintop in Greece, and nobody wanted to talk about it with her. And so later in life, I've talked to my mom more about her experiences and realized that she actually did have some. And so the only thing I knew about UFOs growing up was my mom's one experience in Greece, and then that was it.
I've heard this sort of thing is also generational. Like if your parents or your grandparents or your siblings have these experiences, that it's something that's in your brain. It's something that is passed down from generation to generation. So I'm curious if the reason that you're having these experiences, these contact experiences, is because it's in your DNA. What are your thoughts?
Um, that's a really fascinating question. For a long time after I had my experience, I didn't want to meet other people who had had experiences because I wasn't able to interpret what had happened to me. And I was honestly paranoid that other people's UFOs would then start coming to me. Um, and so I eventually met Chris Bledsoe through a failed documentary that was going to happen on me. I got his phone number and we had an amazing conversation. Oh, probably about 3 years ago. And Chris was telling me that there was a lineage in the Cherokee Choctaw bloodline that has some sort of pre-European contact that is related to the lost tribes of Israel, which is wild. And it gets a bit woo-woo, and you have to put a tinfoil hat on top of a tinfoil hat at first to sort of kind of swallow down that conspiracy theory or theory in general. But what is really interesting about what he's saying is that there are two particular gene groups that he thinks are being particularly targeted, and that's Scottish people and people with Choctaw or Cherokee bloodline. And so for a long time, before I even started going out into the UFO community, I kind of came to my own conclusion that whatever was going on with me, that they were some type of cloners. And I heavily studied genetics and tried to wrap my head around that, which I don't think you can. And kind of came to the conclusion that the people that are being chosen are sort of like the best of humanity for some sort of agenda. Now, for me, when I first had my my experience, I didn't see a UFO at first. In fact, it was really bizarre. I was trying to tell my stepfather that I was going to be moving to Portland, and I had a vision, a psychic flash, a waking dream. I don't know how to explain it, but I was here, and then all of a sudden I was driving the U-Haul, and I saw lights running into me, and then I thought I was going to die. And then I got back on the phone, and my stepfather was asking me if I was still on the phone. All the hair was standing up on my neck. There were big goosebumps. Um, I told my former girlfriend about this before we went on the trip, and she's like, we should prepare for it. So as far as like connecting DNA to being contacted, I do know that there's a higher probability that you're going to be an abductee if you have family in the military, if you are military, if you're a pilot, commercial pilot, if you have green or hazel eyes, there's a higher chance as well. And so there's a lot of these really interesting anomalies that play into maybe why they pick the people that they do. And those are just some of my anecdotal theories on it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So it was almost like an out of body experience when you were talking to your stepdad, huh?
Yeah, an out of body experience I've had, and I've physically been out of my body and seen my soul. And that's a whole nother story. And so this was more along the lines of like a thought zap, like a conscious spreading of. I mean, it was so perfect. I literally was here, and then I'm in the car driving the U-Haul at night, because I told my stepfather I was going to drive through the night because my former girlfriend was from Alaska and she was going to melt like a popsicle. And so that was part of the whole really strange plan. Was I was already planning to drive tonight. I'd already rented the U-Haul on the internet with my stepfather's credit card, and that's why I was telling him what's going on. So it's confusing sometimes. I when I had the premonition, I really thought that I was going to die that night. And I really prepared for it. And then when I saw the UFO, it was so bizarre that, you see, you got to understand that when this premonition happened for me, I was on the phone and my stepfather said, most industrial accidents happen between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. Because I said, hey, I'm going to drive through the night. And that's not actually true. But most industrial accidents do not happen between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, to be honest with your audience, okay? But that's what he said. And so I knew something was going to happen between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning on July 15th. So when it hit 3 a.m., I thought that I was done with the experience. We were clear, and I was laughing to myself. I was like, God, I've been so pissed off and all this anxiety over what? And then that's when I saw 3 lights. It flipped. It came down over towards the field, and it was a horseshoe-shaped boomerang with a little dome on top. The 3 lights combined to one spot on the field, and I could see it. And I'm driving 65. There's no cars on the freeway. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm looking at a UFO. And then I look over at my former girlfriend and I say, hey, take a look at that. And then it whoosh, came straight over. And the thing that was so wild about that is that when I said, take a look at that, it hurt me and came over after the end of my sentence. And so I'm confronted with, it can hear me. I'm confronted with it showing up at the time of my premonition. And then I'm also dealing with the fact that now it's flying next to my U-Haul, less than maybe 10 feet away from the driver's side. And then that's when it started flying backwards in front of the U-Haul at 20 feet, hovering above the ground, just under about 30 feet wide. And it's wobbling, man. It's going like this.
No way.
And I'm looking at it, and it's 20, 25 feet away, and I'm thinking to myself, I am not stopping. No way. There's no one on the freeway. And the thing that was interesting about that is right before I saw it, I realized that there was nobody on the freeway, and I got really lonely. I was like, wow, there's car lights like 30 miles away. Like, how is there no one on I-5 in the middle of the night? And so all of a sudden it's flying backwards in front of me, wobbling. And so I'm tripped out, right? I'm sort of like, okay, it heard me. Now it's flying in front of me. And what I noticed immediately is that it had a halo around it.
Like a glowing light?
So you know how like when you look at a TV and it's static, right? Mm-hmm. There's just the TV fuzz. So imagine that same thing as a fog, and now make it glowing like an angel glow. And now put that almost, I'd say 10 feet around the entire craft, maybe more. So I could see stars that were fuzzy, and then I could see stars right outside of it that were clear. And I did that on all sides of the craft. And so I'm looking at it for a while and I'm observing it, and I'm just like, I can't believe this thing has a halo. Like it's like a firefly. It's totally exciting the oxygen molecules around it. And it's silent. No, no footprint at all. There's no exhaust, nothing.
Did you have the radio on or anything?
No, I did it.
I'm just curious if it messed with your electronics in the car.
It did actually. And so what ended up happening is it came in 10 feet closer. So when it came in 10 feet closer, that was the first time I was like, is this a friend or foe? I actually got scared, and I thought to myself, maybe a laser beam's going to come out of this. But you know what? The wing was like this thick. I've never seen a wing on anything that thin before. I mean, we're talking like under a quarter of an inch, maybe less. So there was no bombs that could be put inside of this. There was no lasers. And so thin and simplistic. I was trying to imagine where a weapon could even be on this thing, not really thinking that the lights could be a weapon.
Did you say what color it was? Was it metallic?
Yeah, it was like a dull gray, but it was kind of shimmering a little bit. The luminosity that night was about 75% in Pisces, and so it I could see it pretty well. And on the wing itself, it had quadrants and then little circles inside of that quadrants. So there was like etched into the metal. That's how long I had to actually look at it. I was like, could see what it was, the very fine details. And so now that it's even closer to me, I moved back into my seat, but you're in a U-Haul, you can't go anywhere, right? And then my former girlfriend, she did the same thing. And we're like, what? And I look over at her and she's like this. And I'm all, ha ha. And I looked straight ahead, and that's when I looked into the center light for the first time. I had avoided the light and was kind of looking to the sides of it, because when you drive, you don't look into other car lights.
Right.
For some reason, I looked right into the center light, which is probably like about the size of a pool light, about 9 or 11 inches across. And it was white. And all of a sudden, I had the best euphoric high I've ever had. Like, I could actually see the cells in my body, and every single cell has fireworks, like all at once. And so all of a sudden, I'm driving, and I can feel it. It's just like this explosion, and all of a sudden, I'm just like, oh. And then I look at the speedometer, and it's like this. So those old U-Hauls are like this with the speedometer when they're going. I mean, those things are lucky to even be making it where they go as far as those things run, right? And so this thing was going like this, and I was actually playing a game the whole time, just seeing if I could keep it still with my foot, which is impossible. And so it's teetering back and forth, and now this thing's in front of me, and it's like this. And so I'm like, okay, either the car's turned off or there's no time. But I didn't think about the no time thing. I'm like, the car's turned off. And then I thought, it must be driving the vehicle for me. So when I looked at the light, it didn't give me any spots, but it actually made my eyes feel good. I don't know if you've ever looked into a light that didn't give you spots when you look at it. Because if you look into the sun and you look away, right, it's like,
yep,
the whole experience. You're like, oh man, and you got to take a while to kind of, none of that. And so I'm looking into the center light. I realize that the speedometer stuck, and then I go like this. I'm frozen in place. So I don't know if your audience can see this, but I have a surgical scar right here. I broke my elbow into 27 places. And when I got up after I passed out, it went to the size of a cantaloupe, and I tried to move it. Well, I was paralyzed. My arm was actually physically paralyzed. And that's exactly how it felt. I mean, I was frozen like concrete. And so all of a sudden, I look at the speedometer, I realize that I'm paralyzed, and I shut my eyes at 65 miles an hour with this thing in front of me. And so I'm inside of my head, and I'm going, don't think it's inside of your head. Anyway, you dummy. That's a thought. You know what? You're never going to get this audience again. Just ask it a question. And I thought, well, if it's inside of your head, then you must be inside of its head. And maybe this is some kind of like cellular phone. So this dialogue's kind of going on in my head, right?
Are you still feeling euphoric while this is going on, or did that already pass?
Um, the feeling was like when I took codeine cough syrup for the first time and nobody told me that there was codeine in it. I just drank the whole bottle when I was a teenager and just collapsed on the spot. And so it was very, very similar to that, just like real, just like, but I was so composed. But I think when I was inside of my mind, I wasn't even thinking about my body at that point. And so I'm trying to sort of hide in my mind now. And I say, you know what? You should ask it a question. And I said, what's the answer to the universe? It was like all I could come up with. I felt like I was running out of time. And then all of a sudden, I stopped thinking for a minute. And I was like, whoa. And then all of a sudden, in red letters in my head, I saw ALL space, IS space, all is one in red letters. And I was such a dick. I should have been like, wow, thank you for this amazing gift. But I was 21 at the time. And I said, I could have told you that. You know what? You got it. This is unbelievable. No one's ever going to believe me. Give me an equation. Give me some kind of tangible scientific proof so I can prove this. And then that's when it moved to the side. And the series of events happened very fast. And now I'm in a big U-Haul, so I can't see all the way over. So I saw it slowly go off to the side. I saw its wings kind of go like this. And then my former girlfriend was just like this. She's looking at it. She goes, it's right there. It's gone. And I like pull over to the side of the road. There's still nobody there. We jump out. We hug each other. And we're just standing there. And there's this star right over the Toulouse Basin, which I say wrong every time. But it's just right below Fresno. And it's about 50 miles wide. So distance equals rate times time. It went about 8,000 to 10,000 miles an hour without making a peep. And then was like a planet over the Sierras. And I could see it. And I was like, what? How is that? Like, you were here and now you're over there. Like, you're totally showing off. And then the first words out of my former girlfriend were, do you think they'll come back? I wasn't ready for that, right? And I thought, I hope so. She said, I don't ever want to see that again. That was the scariest, most horrible experience in my whole life. And then I started like going into truth, James. And I was like, you know what? I felt like it was some kind of space girl. And she's like, oh, great, space girls. I had to deal with all those girls in California, like, you know, all over you. And now I got to worry about space girls. And I'm like sitting there on the side of the freeway, like, are we really having this conversation right now? We're having like a couple bickering now? Like, holy shit. So we get in the car and just started going. And that was the very first experience. And I probably had about 15 experiences since then that brought me to this point to do this kind of stuff.
That's incredible. Okay, so let's go back to Space Girls really quick. What made you feel the feeling or the emotion of it being feminine or girls, or, you know, I'm curious what was going on in your mind and your body and your heart when you felt that.
It was like after it left, I felt these eyes in the back of my head. And it was like I was looking at this face and I was seeing it as attractive. Like there was something very familiar and very awkward and strange. And the fact that I even said anything to her about that was me like really spinning out of control, trying to figure out where the hell the ground was. And then when she said that, oh great, now I gotta worry about space girls, it like, he's like, you know, grounded me. And then I was able to move on. But it was like whatever was in my head, there was still a string attached to it, even though it went over to the mountain range. Like it had like left some kind of tag, and that this tin can that I was connected to, now I was connected to some meteorite that was like flying around in the universe, but we were still connected. And so I guess at the time, the only way I could describe it as is some sort of feminine energy.
Yeah, that's amazing. Did you guys lose time at all? Did you notice that time had passed?
Yeah, you know, for years, I never was able to figure out where the exact spot was until about a year ago, where I decided to use some AI technology and map out exactly when we left, because I had looked at the clock and remembered it and where we were, and there was no missing time at all. And so what is fascinating, though, is that later on in life, oh, this stuff would come and visit me periodically every so many years. But probably in about 2009, I had left Portland. I had a dream that I got pulled through a window the night that my grandmother died. And so I was feeling like all of this UFO stuff was kind of evil and that they were following me. And then I had spent the last conversation with my grandmother explaining to her about UFOs. So I kind of felt like an idiot. Like, fuck. I knew that was the last time I was going to talk to my grandmother because she was in the hospital and she was dying. And I chose to talk about UFOs. So I was like, man, this obsession is getting too much. And so I left and went down to California to be a surf instructor. I had some success while I was in town on vacation and decided to work for an old friend. We found a cottage in Montecito. Well, we got 2 healer puppies at the time, and it was on a 1 acre, and it was little fruit trees, and it was right below Romero Canyon. And so, anyways, one night we are over at a friend's house who pretty wealthy guy from the East Coast who's a famous surf photographer. We're in the jacuzzi, and he's all, hey, I want you to tell me your UFO story. So I tell the story, and at the end, he just butts in and he goes, well, that was military. Definitely military. And I went, well, come on, man. You don't know. Like, oh, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. So I get pissed off, and I just leave. And he was like, come on, man. I was just messing with you. I recently talked to Krista, my old partner, and I had actually forgotten about that argument. So we drove over the hill back to our house, which was like 5 minutes away. We're going down Ortega Bridge, down to the 192 where it T-bones, and there's a giant white owl in the tree. Huge. I mean, we're talking like almost 4 feet tall white owl, and he's sitting in the tree. And I pulled right up in my black Dodge pickup truck, turned my lights on it, and you know what I did?
What?
I freaking screamed out, fuck you! And I flicked it off, and I peeled out, and the bird didn't even move. So I go down to my house, which is like 2 minutes away, right? That fucking bird could have flown over there if it wanted to. The owls play a big part in my UFO stuff now, as far as understanding the prerequisites towards actually having a experience. The owls tend to come in first. And so I go home, and we're tired, and we go to sleep. Nothing seems out of the ordinary. I wake up middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I'm completely naked. I went over to my little pee rock kind of in the corner of the property. I'm peeing for maybe 2 minutes. I'm a pretty quick peer, and I'm looking up at the stars. And all I remember, I swear to God, all I remember was that the stars looked friendly. It's weird, right? They were twinkling, and they seemed friendly. No idea why I got that, but I remember looking at 2 stars and being like, yeah. And then I look back at the house, and all the lights are on, and the door's open. I'm all, what? I look, and I walk over, and there's Krista, and she's on the bed, and she's like this, and she's crying. She's got all of her clothes on. Kenny, the next door neighbor, this older guy, who's like an antiquer, he's looking at me naked, and he goes, James, we've been searching for you for 45 minutes. We were literally about to call the cops before you walked in. And so I go, whoa. First off, let me go get a towel. I'm naked. For now, Kenny, get out of here. I was only gone for 3 minutes. You guys are out of your mind. They're all, James, we went down the street. We went on every single part of this property. You realize that there's just little tiny fruit trees, right? We've been yelling your name. And I'm just like not able to process any of this because I was only in that corner for 3 minutes. And so I go down and I calm Krista down, and she's crying and she's hysterical. She's snotting. And I'm just like, what the fuck? How the fuck did we get to this point? We were just like peaceful and calm. So we go back to sleep. We're going to bed, and I just pass out like a log normally. An airplane could fly over me and I'd have no idea. And so she wakes up right before we go to bed, and she said there was a white Labrador looking back at her with giant black eyes. Now, we had 2 healer puppies, and blue healers, which, I'm sure your audience is familiar. The Preacher of the Choir, they have black faces. They're black, right? That's why they're blue healers. So there's no reason to see this white Labrador with big eyes staring back at us. Now, here's the kicker. I woke up in the morning, and she told me this, and I'm just kind of like, All right, that was already a bizarre night. Now she's talking about Labradors with black eyes. This is getting weird. I go to every single doorknob in the house. There are 5 doors. The front door is hanging like this, the knob. The back door is hanging like this. The room to the office is hanging. Our bedroom door is hanging. I guess there was only 4 doors. And so the thing that was so bizarre is that I looked inside and each one was on the very last thread. Every single doorknob was on the last thread if you measured it. And there was no wind that night whatsoever. It was like they left a calling card. And, you know, Krista, I know, has gone on to tell some of her new partners about what's happened. And every time she does, she has to stop telling them the story because they think she's crazy. And I'm the one that disappeared.
That's insane. It's so interesting because, I mean, if they can walk through walls and do all of these things, like, why are they breaking your doorknobs? It had to have been intentional to, like you said, like, leave their signature, let you know that they were there. They want you to know, it seems like. Why else would they do that?
It was really bizarre and sort of played into more of my negative context towards them. I was like, okay, so you followed me in Portland. You pulled me through a window. When I got pulled through that window too, I saw inside the window and I just saw billions of bubbles. Like I was inside of an atom when they pulled me through. And then all I could do after that was go over to the window and do this. I was trying to push my finger through it. So it was like all this bizarre shit. And then I woke up outside of the skyscraper that I was living at. And that's how the dream ended. And then I found out my grandmother died. And now I have this happen. And so now I'm just sort of feeling like I'm being followed. And that if anybody I tell this stuff to, they're going to think I'm fucking nuts. You know, and if they hadn't been in the car and seen that first UFO, well, they'd have no context or understand why this is so important to me.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people now are coming to understand that this stuff is happening more and more often. People are taking experiencers more seriously now because of everything that's coming to light. I do want to go back, though, to Portland. So you fell asleep, were taken out of your bedroom window, and then woke up outside of the building that you were staying in. Is that correct?
Yeah, I woke up in the dream and I could see myself in the dream float up out of the bed and then go through the window head first and then sort of rotate there. And then I woke up and looked down, and I'm pretty afraid of heights, honestly. And that's when it ended. And it was so real and it was so vivid that, I mean, it scared the shit out of me. I had never had a dream where somebody pulled me through a window like that. And that was sort of the beginning of these dreams that I would have that were sort of like these messages. But that one wasn't. That was something that was like probably along the lines of an abduction, and I just caught the tail end of it.
Have you thought about having a regression to see what maybe would come up?
So this happened in 2006. And so after Montecito, about 2016, I'm sleeping in my pop-up camper. I was surfing Rincon, and I had a dream that I ended up on a mothership. And we can go into more details about that. And then I had another dream that I was shown some sort of science fiction movie about the end of the world, and that I was like outside of the planet watching it all on fire, and then saw that the rich had taken themselves off the planet and were some kind of satellite, and they go down and pick people to go on these renegade missions, and they were going to go try and pillage another Earth. And then all of a sudden, the people that they picked to do this off of the planet, the peasants, decide that they don't want to do it. And then their time machine gets messed up when they're at this exoplanet. And then the Council of Eight gathers them up, which are these giant praying mantises. They see in some kind of giant orb that shows them past, present, and future, and that they can't go fucking up the universe. And then they get brought back to Earth. But then there's an AI general that has replicated itself and is now all throughout the universe, and there's nothing they could do. Well, after I had that dream, I thought, I got to get a fucking regression. I got to figure out what the fuck is going on inside of my head. So this is probably like around 2017. I decide one night after watching a Vice program with Lori McDonald, who's a famous hypnosis therapist, that I was going to call her up. So I watched the episode, I look her up online, and literally 5 minutes after the episode, I'm talking to her. We talked for like half an hour. So I finally go, you know what, Lori? I'm going to come see you. So I drive all the way up to Sacramento. I go in there, and I only expected to be in there for like an hour. I was in there for 4 hours.
Whoa.
And I would say for the first hour and a half, I was awake. I knew what was going on, and I was kind of being very skeptical. And I had done a ton of research on hypnotherapy and was sort of on the fence about it. Like, well, am I just going to create some new memories and alternate stuff? Like, are there really any professional hypnotherapists out there? Are they all just sort of amateurs, sort of, pretending to be magicians? And is this really going to lend itself to helping me get past this paranoia I have, right? They're in my head kind of stuff. Like, how do I get past that? So at some point, we're going into it, and I just stopped listening to her, and I just felt this vertebrae come off this part of my head, 3 vertebrae, and it was dangling, and I went like this, and I pushed into it, and I immediately was back on the freeway with the UFO that I met. And I had asked how many times I'd been taken, and I said I'd been taken that night on the freeway. I had been taken many, many times. And so I'm sort of like not sure how to interpret that. And then all of a sudden, I see this giant football. It's actually what's above me right here in this painting. And it had a blue line right down the middle of it. And I saw it. It was like shining, and it was killer. And I was like, wow, is that a mothership? Holy shit. And I like remember it perfectly in my head. Again, this is it right above me here. And so I told her what had happened, and then I told her, at the end of it, I got an Academy Award, and I'm winning an award, and I'm up there, and I'm like feeling all of this attention, and I get done with the hypnosis, and I go, these fucking aliens want me to make a movie for them? Like, I'm just so confused. Like, I have no fucking clue what's going on. Like, what was that mothership? Now they want me to make a movie for them. Like, this is fucking bizarre. And not to mention, I'm like the most dyslexic person I've met. I have so many learning disabilities, probably about the hardest thing I could ever try to accomplish. So I realized that hypnotherapy, it channeled something, and it connected me in with something bigger. And so ever since that, I've been drawing this image. And just recently, I had a MUFON investigator send me a petroglyph from Monument, Natural Bridges Monument in Utah. And there's a petroglyph of this exactly. In my image, and this match perfectly. And the whole myth of that petroglyph is that it's a burning shield, and that they're extraterrestrials that came here to share information and trade species and different animals. So I was like, how did I see that in my hypnosis? And then that matches perfectly with a petroglyph that's 5,000 years old that I've never even seen before. So, it was really fascinating and kind of spooked me even more. And it led me on a journey, honestly, to then, like, I did another hypnotherapy session with Barbara Lamb, who's another really famous hypnotherapy person. And, sort of saw myself like being taken off world and going to some planet where there was like nothing but just forest. And then just this planet with waves where the ocean was purple. And like, I don't know if I made any of that shit up or any of it was real. But the time of what was going on, Barbara Lamb was doing that hypnosis. I was living in the Mesa with my wife at the time, who I feel like was chosen for me by extraterrestrials, which sounds even more bizarre. But that house was haunted with UFO shit. That when I met her, all of a sudden there was so much shit going on. It all started when I gave her a wetsuit, and then we went in the morning to go surfing, and the wetsuit was twisted. So the logo on the front was on the back, and the back was on the front. and she worked in the UPS store for 14 years. So we were both perplexed. And I know O'Neill wetsuits. The logo's always right here over the chest, and there was a diamond in the middle. And then later on, there were lights in the room that woke her up before he went to sleep. There was all kinds of phenomenon happening at the house. And then later, I started to learn about her. Both of our fathers taught at West Point at the same time, and are both special forces, and both went to Vietnam. And so these similarities and comparisons just continued. And then I decided to tell her that UFOs wanted me to breed with her so that we could make children, and that the second child would be the one. And she still wanted to make babies with me. I'm like, great, this is definitely my soulmate, right? And so, she's Scottish. Her father's actually was born in Scotland, and she has a Scottish passport. And then I'm Cherokee quite a bit. My family comes from the Tennessee Valley, Chattanooga. And so that kind of plays into the whole Chris Bledsoe thing. So for a long time, like, I was just sort of spinning with all this stuff. I met this woman, got this idea to like make these babies with her. And then Chris just sort of like laid it out. And he's like, look, you're a chosen one. I hate that word. I think it's stupid. But you know what? They just don't come to everybody. And that they're angels and they're here to help you. And that the gifts will come after about 12 or 13 years. And he's just started laying out like all this shit, man. And you know what the most fascinating thing about that conversation was, is that when I first talked to Chris, he didn't care about my UFO experience as much as he was interested in my early childhood trauma. And I'm like, what? What do you care about that for? And he's like, where is it? Where do you have the trauma? I was like, well, my stepfather like abused me for 7 years in Virginia. Does that constitute anything? He's like, that's it. They came to you because of your suffering. So for like almost a year, I just started going into my childhood suffering. And I thought that my childhood was really bad. And I didn't realize that everybody has a hard time out there. But once I started investigating what actually happened, I didn't poop for a year and a half after my dad got divorced. I would just randomly scream. My mom moved to Virginia and I was in California. And so as soon as we got there, I lost my mind. My stepfather had to actually quit his job just to take me hunting and fishing because they weren't sure if I was even going to survive because I was suicidal. So it was like, I mean, me even being here is an amazing thing. And then all of this trauma. And then Chris is like, look, in the 80s, they did a study, the CIA, where they took 160 people who had high experiences. And they said, what is the commonality between all of these folks? And I'm sure that there's experiencers that will watch this and will probably fall in line with this some way or form. But all of them had early childhood trauma. That was the only thing connecting all of these people together. Not only just early childhood trauma, but extreme. And so he says that they're drawn to your suffering. And so I played with like these Bledsoe conceptions for quite some time. Not really taking them as whole, but sort of being a little bit on the fence and testing it. And you know what ended up happening is that I started communicating with the people in my head, and I said, well, why do you come to Chris Bledsoe all the time and you won't come to me? You know, I'm talking to people all the time. You need to show up for me, goddammit. And I started like cussing in my head and getting pissed. Well, about a week later, I'm surfing Rincon Point, and I've got the video of it. I'm on the beach, and all of a sudden, a light just comes straight down the Santa Barbara Channel. It holds its position. I pull out my phone, and I fucking film it. It sits there for like 53 seconds and then just vanishes on my camera. And I saw it streak across the sky. And I had a surfer friend who I went to high school with, And he was out there in the water, and I texted him afterwards. I'm like, bro, you missed the UFO. You should have just stayed out a little longer. He was like, fuck. He was so pissed. And so, like, that was because of Chris Bledsoe. And that was sort of a hitchhiker's effect. And then the thing that's been so bizarre and has really escalated here at my house is that this is crazy. So, like, right before I went to contact in the desert, about a week before, I got a message in my head that said, text Chris, you're thinking about him. I said, well, why do I want to text Chris? I'm thinking about him. And, I don't want to bother him. He's a busy guy now. He's doing shit all the time. He's all over the place. So when he texts me back, on it. And, I did it anyways, because it's like, what do I have to lose? I got to listen to that voice in my head, right? And he said, same to you. So a day later, I'm sitting outside having a conversation with a friend, and I look through a hole in the tree, and there's a fucking 300-yard boomerang just sitting there. It was like, what? And it goes, and it disappeared, and literally disappeared in front of me. I'm talking to the person on the phone. I'm like, I just saw a UFO. I call MUFON. I report it. I do all this. I talk to their investigator here, Richard. I'm like, I saw it. Oh my God, and they're like, did you get it on the phone? No, it's on the fucking phone. So a couple nights later, I'm walking around, and I got this message in my head as I was locking up the doors, like probably around 10 o'clock, and it said, hey, go walk to the back of the property. I'm like, what? Well, was that me? Well, just go check it out anyways. So I go, and I see these owls going right past this eucalyptus. And owls, right? They're super quiet when they fly. Well, I saw one owl go past in its silhouette, and then I saw 3 right on top of each other, another 2, 1, 3, and then all of a sudden, a perfect chevron UFO, just like the Phoenix Lights, and it blended itself in like a comet. I was like, ha! And I ran home and I drew it immediately. And I wrote down the time. And I was like, it had 5 lights, and it was a perfect chevron. And I saw it. And I was just like ecstatic. I'm trying to tell all these MUFON people, but they're like, they're not interested. Like, you didn't get footage of it? Well, fuck you, right? I'm all, God damn it, get the fuck up here. Something's going to happen. So I'm under the reality now at this point that the owls, right? It blended itself with the owls. So I'm like, that's not fucking military. What the fuck was that? Like, that was so cool. That was such an amazing phenomenon. I've never seen anything like that. And it was right in my field of view. And so the very next night, I just, not thinking anything of it, I'm taking a hot shower, and I put my kids away to sleep. It's probably like 9:30, 10, which is way too late to put a 3 and 1-year-old away. Believe me, it was a very long day, and I'm stressed out, and I'm in the shower, and I'm just like trying to just wind down. And my German Shepherd's in the backyard. I had forgotten about her back there, and she's just barking. And I'm so tired that I'm like, I don't even care. This goes on for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, oh, Sage, you're driving me crazy. And I'm like, I can't take it anymore. And I jump out of the shower. I'm still wet. I didn't even grab a towel. I walk outside to the laundry room. I step outside, and she's looking at me, and she goes completely quiet. And she kind of went like this. Give me this like Kermit the Frog face, like looking at me. I'm all, oh, now you're quiet? And I looked up, and I saw an owl flying over, and it morphed into the chevron and was less than it was. If I threw a ball up in the air, I would have hit this thing. And I think it was hovering over my house that whole time, and the dog was barking. It flew right over my head. And when I looked at it, it was like I was drunk. And I was trying to look at it, but it was fuzzy, almost like the heat on the surface of a hot street. And I couldn't make out the edges of it. And it flew right over my head. And those circles that I saw, there were lines in between. And I was like, looked like a fly or something. It was weird. And I immediately drew it down. And the words that I wrote were, I thought I saw an owl above me. And when I realized it was a UFO, I got scared. And the thing was, it went right over my head. And then it dissolved into a tree like a CD going into something, just like, whoop. And I was all, ah. And so like, every day I've been looking at the tree. I've been looking at all this stuff. I called people from MUFON to come up. So I run in the house and I grab my cell phone, right, to videotape it. And I'm like, oh my God, maybe I'll see it again. And then a group of pigeons or ducks flew by in a chevron formation, and I got that on still. somebody contacts me on Instagram. They're like, James, we saw your drawing in the owls and stuff. We saw one in Southern Oregon years ago fly really quietly over us. And then 5 minutes later, we saw a group of doves, or maybe it was some other type of bird, fly in a chevron formation. And I went, did I write that in my post? But no, I said, dude, look at this. And I sent him the video and he went, we are all freaking out right now. Like, you filmed what we saw 5 minutes afterwards. And I was like, yeah, it was fucked up. It was like almost fucking with me. Like, hey, look at this. And then even just a couple nights ago, I saw a group of pigeons flying across right before dark. And right at the last second, they went from a ball into a chevron shape and then flew off to the other side. And then last night, I'm outside with my daughter and I saw this bright light and then it went straight up into the sky and disappeared. I tried to wake up my wife and she's dead asleep at like 11 o'clock at night. I stayed up until 2 o'clock watching the sky going, what the fuck am I doing out here? I need to go to sleep.
How often is this happening? How often are you seeing crafts in the sky?
Well, for a long time, years will go by with nothing, just fucking nothing. And then like all of this Chris Bledsoe stuff and like thinking about him and has like created some kind of like energy that's pulled them in. And so 2 weeks ago, after I saw the chevron, I was outside and I said, you know what? It'd be great if you could see this so that my wife would change her work schedule so that I could write this memoir so I don't have to like watch the baby all day long and not get to work on this. It's driving me crazy. And so I look up and I saw like a little white satellite, but then I saw another one go a different direction. I saw another one and there were like 13 or 14 of them. And right in the middle of that whole flurry, she came outside and saw it. And I was like, yes. And there was like undeniable. It was like these things just, and the thing was is that you would see it and then it would disappear in 5 seconds. You would see it and then it would disappear. And Starlink, right? It's a bunch of them in a row and they go across Santa's sleigh. So I'm very aware. And then Vandenberg, I live here. We have lots of rockets that go by. I'm aware of what that looks like. So the thing that was so creepy about that is that probably about 30 minutes after we had all of that flurry, a black helicopter flew so fast through our backyard that it almost hit the fence. And I saw it through our window in the living room. And its doors were open and it flew through the yard. And I was like, what the fuck was there? A giant, like not a small black helicopter, like one that had bay doors and open. And it flew and almost hit the fence in the backyard right after that. And so,
what's going on? I don't is the military involved with this? Like, how are they like working with these entities? Like, what's going on? I don't understand.
So I'm not going to reveal the person that told me this because he's working on a memoir, but I was at a Ciron group with a bunch of experiencers, and there was a guy who used to work at Wright Air Force Base, Patterson Air Force Base, and he got a message through a teleprompter on CNN back when they first came up with that. And it was weird. He saw something and then he called the Pentagon and said, hey, I know about something that's going on. And they said, how the fuck do you know about that? He's like, I saw it on the teleprompter on CNN. And so without giving away his whole story, he said that he asked one of his top friends, what the fuck is this all about? Like, why are people even getting taken in the first place? And it took me a couple of days to kind of swallow what he said and his explanation for it. And, whenever you hear people talk about this, right, it's always, you got to take it as a grain of salt. You can't believe everything everyone says to you, right? But it's an interesting perspective. And his perspective was, look, they can't control these things. They can't defend us from it. But what they can do is they can be there when it happens and use these people as bait. And in that, there could be a crash, there could be a mistake, and then they're there to pick up on what happens. So the extraterrestrials, the celestial beings, the interdimensional beings, demons, angels, whatever the fuck this thing is that is higher consciousness than us that's coming here, they somehow or another have this ability to kind of know what's going on before things happen. So when I was at Contact in the Desert, I asked Chris Bledsoe about that first UFO boomerang I just told you about that I saw through the trees recently. I said,
Mm-hmm.
Chris, how did they know to be right in that hole? Because if you come to my house now, that hole's overgrown now. It doesn't exist. But that tree was at a perfect point to where I could see it. And he said, look, James, they can go back and forth in time. And I was like, that sounds dumb. Like back and forth in time, that's like science fiction. And so I was trying to conceptualize it. And then I told my wife about it. And then we kind of, got in an argument. And then she's 2 days later after we made up, she said, I had a dream about time the other night. And I went, what? You had a dream about time? Who has dreams about time? She's all, well, I didn't see anything. It was how I felt about time. I'm all, oh, this is even better. So I had her go record it, and then I came back and I put it into a text format and I'm reading it. And she said that she felt time simultaneously, all connected. And then I went and looked, and there's this thing called block theory. And so, like, if you look at these interdimensional beings, right, and they're in the fourth dimension, that means that they can see time. So they can see you as a child and they can see you as an old man, all in the same span. And maybe that's just normal to them. And so they're actually going back and forth in time to put these things right where we can see them. So there's this. So they're allowing people to be taken off planet, and the U.S. military and the UFOs know it. And the military is being allowed to observe what's going on as long as they don't interfere. And that's the fucked up part. So for me, the reason I came out was because of Louis Elizondo, right? Coming out and then Fravor and all of that really kind of broke the ice for me. But what's not being talked about in this conversation are the people who've been abducted for a long time. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of these people out there. And if the military can't protect us and they're using us as bait to then observe what's going on so that they can get any technology so they can turn it into some kind of weapon, I mean, that's probably their smartest thing that they could do if that's what their objective is.
I just have a hard. I mean, yes, I agree. That's probably what the government's trying to do, but I just feel like these beings wouldn't allow them to get everything they need in order to make these weapons that we're going to end up using to harm each other and kill off this planet that they probably share with us. So I feel like it's in their best interest to not let the government have these machines or whatever they are, which I've heard are also conscious beings. It's not just nuts and bolts. It's also like a conscious being that's alive, and it's all fascinating. I mean, it's just such a mystery. It's like this gray area, this line between the spirit world and the physical world, and like the different dimensions and time and everything is kind of melting together. I don't know what to believe, but listening to Chris Bledsoe gives me hope. He thinks they're angels, and I kind of want to believe that they're angels. I kind of want to believe that they're benevolent beings that are here to help us with the evolution of humanity, into the next stage. I want to believe that. I hope that's the case, but I don't know. I really don't. What do you think?
Well, if we go back to what I said, and that whoever that was on the freeway back in 2006 said the answer to the universe is all is one. So when we look at like the Almanac of Extraterrestrial Species by Jim, I can't remember his last name, great guy. We can see that, it's through anecdotal evidence and the compiling of that type of thing, that different people associate these different mottos with these different groups. So for me, the way that I've kind of discerned it is that you either are hive mind and all is one, or it's all for one, which is like the extreme opposite. Total greed, total selfishness, gimme, gimme, gimme. And then the other side of that is being able to make room for other people, regardless of who they are, where they're coming from. Now, if we are a danger to ourselves now, the time scale of the universe, right, is immense. So if we're a threat here, we could technically be a threat to everybody in the universe. once we get a certain type of technology, to then move ourselves past this Fermi paradox and be able to, bridge the gap to go faster than light, which apparently they've been able to do. But for me, I think that the ultimate weapon is the very thing that they're doing. I mean, if our government could somehow or another create something that could move back and forth in time, then your enemy wouldn't even have time to plan anything out. You'd already know what they were doing before they're doing it. And we see that when these UFOs or UAPs, for better term, are around naval ships. They're around aircraft carriers all of the time. I mean, Ryan Graves, he says he saw this stuff every day for 2.5 years.
Right.
A black square inside of a clear, it was a cube inside of a bubble.
Sphere.
Yeah. So like, they know way more than they're letting us on to be, and they want us to just keep guessing. And my best inclination is that the true agenda is that they want the best interests for us. Now, where I have a hard time understanding it is, how can we not view them as assholes, right? It's like, hey, you're letting us fuck each other up and we have all this crappy technology. Why don't you just come down and help us out, right? But then you give that technology to a bunch of primitive people, and then they turn it against each other and then create, Big Brother in 1984 immediately. And so we're really at the cusp right now of our own civilization having that birth of AI. And in, 30 years time, half of the workforce will be gone. The robots that you see nowadays are the worst robots you'll ever see. Everything from now on is going to get better, right? But who? But for who? And so we're seeing this division in the classes, right? But then when we see these UFOs show up, they seem to have all of the same technology. They're all running around using free energy in these machines. And then they, we hear stories that they don't have engines and that they have nothing inside of them and they work on magic or whatever. And like you said, some of these things are maybe even conscious. I've even heard motherships referred to as soul recycling centers, and that the motherships themselves are even conscious. So I guess the only way that we can prepare ourselves for what's going to happen next is to sort of accept what's going on and say, okay, maybe they really are taking people, and then accept that this hybridization is going on, and then accept that maybe that's just natural. That's just the natural way that consciousness develops consciousness, that you can't get a big brain on a stick unless you make some genetic additions, because eventually a rock's going to hit our planet and then we have to start life all over again.
Right.
So I believe that they're picking the best of us to somehow or another mix in with them, and that any UFO you see has a CRISPR on board. What's a CRISPR, right? A CRISPR, right, is a little virus that they have that can cut DNA, right? Did you know the lady that came up with that had a dream that Hitler was looking at her CRISPR, and he was saying, wow, this is amazing. Think about what I could have done with this. And then she wakes up.
Whoa.
Maybe I should destroy this technology, and that's a real story. And so if each group is a genetic lab, right, and that inside of some of these things is like the size of a football field. So our perspective on what we're seeing is also fucked up, because we're not understanding that, inside of the shopping bag could be huge, right? Just like the Jetsons, right? Remember the Jetsons were in the Flintstones, they brought a shopping bag to the Flintstones and they were all jazzed up because it would open up so big. They're like, we can't believe this. This is amazing. This must be magic. So I'm concerned that we're polluting our planet to a point of getting so that we won't be able to do anything about it once the polar ice caps melt. We'll then have to use AI technology to fix it. And then they're going to militarize it. And so we kind of have all the best and the worst of everything here on this planet, which is probably sort of a microcosm for the whole universe in general.
And then Chris Bledsoe also talks about that the lady showed up to him and said that something's going to happen. There's going to be a new awareness, right? So perhaps there's going to be something that changes within our society that allows us to evolve into the next stage that allows us to let go of all that's no longer serving us as a society, and maybe we do evolve, maybe we do upgrade in some way. I'm hoping. That's my prayer for humanity.
Well, I know that Bashar says that there's a mothership over Sedona, Arizona, and as our consciousness rises, the mothership gets closer to actually descending. And I've always loved that analogy because it's sort of like, hey, we've got a long ways to go before that thing even touches the ground. But I guess it's up to, like my generation. I'm born in '85. I'm pre dial up. You know what I mean? And so like my generation and my children's generation, which will be the last people born before, the rise of the machine or whatever, not to sound, science fiction or whatever, but I mean, that's what's happening. We have to understand that we can change the future. Like if everything is already set in stone, then that means that there has to be alternate realities that we could shift into. And, everyone that has said that UFOs are going to show up on a certain date has been wrong, generally, historically, in the past.
Yep.
And, some of those numbers are, I hear 2025, I hear 2027. But you got to think, like, what is going to be going on in 2027, right? We're looking at political campaign and how everything's setting up. If Donald Trump gets in office, that's one reality. If Kamala Harrison gets into office, that's a total another reality. And then we can look at the political gridlock that will happen, obviously, because we look at Obama getting into office, and he just got bombarded by the Republicans who wouldn't even agree that the sky was blue with them. You know what I mean? And so politics right now, at least in America, is contentious, and people are getting pissed off. And, you can't go to the grocery store now and spend $100 and get what you could a couple years ago. Yet we're being told that the economy is getting better and that things are getting better, but it seems like things are getting harder.
Yeah. So we will see. We will see how things unfold in the next few years. And, all we can do is just do our best and keep our expectations low and our prayers high.
Well, I think that they have to. I think that they have to prove that they're not assholes at some point. You know what I mean? You can only let your kid fuck up so much until you decide to show up and be like, hey, this is enough. We've had enough. And there's so many events that are happening now worldwide that, like, they are trying to show up, and they're slowly revealing themselves in a way to where, like, the prime directive is not the prime directive anymore. That their shift in focus is got to change, because, again, in the next 3 years, there's going to be more that's going to happen in the next 3 years to affect where we're going to be humanity-wise. That's going to be done politically than in the last 40. I mean, there's some serious shit that's going to go down. The pandemic was just a small taste of what can happen when we all become affected. And if UFOs show up, then what? Then what? It's like, okay, great. Well, wait a minute. How come you guys weren't telling us about it? And how come we can't communicate with them? And you're telling me you're trying to shoot them down and fuck with them? I mean, the military is probably not the best communicator for an extraterrestrial civilization. I mean, they probably have so much to share with us. It's unbelievable.
I think that's why they're showing up to us. And I think that's probably why people are saying disclosure is going to happen on the personal level. I think more and more people are going to have these experiences, and that's how we're going to have disclosure. It's not going to be the government saying, hey, they exist. Maybe, but could also be that maybe we all have our own experiences and help us wake up.
I think that they're kind of have sleeper cells out there like myself. And there's people that have just been out there that have been fucked with these things for so long, and that we have a relationship that people like me, and if there's anyone else out there, if I heard this at Contact in the Desert, I'm stealing this. It's our intergalactic duty to inform people about what's on our intergalactic step. Who are these? Who is Starfleet? Where are these things coming from, and why are they here? Is not important as what do we do next? How do we protect ourselves? What if somebody gets taken off world? What do we even do about it? And then if nobody's doing any research or science behind it, well, Jesus, that seems like a sure waste of time and energy to not try to capture that data. I mean, it's almost like this thing's been taboo for so long that it's better for people to not believe in aliens, because when you start coming to the reality that this thing's actually going on, it really fucks with your sense of groundedness. You're like, well, wait a minute. Why are we driving around in cars that crumple? These UFOs, when they stuff, they're in eggs and these different shapes that don't crumple. Why is there, a whole group of how many people die every, I think a whole airplane full of people die on the roads every week. Like it's insane. And we're all playing into this idea like we're making great technology when the very first light bulb is still being used to this day. The technology 100 years ago is better than right now. And it's just, why are we like so focused on entertaining ourselves? It seems like we spend more time on advertising and just looking at ourselves than actually reaching out and making contact and going, we don't know anything. And that's a really beautiful place to be, because then we can start moving forward and say, well, why does the grocery store look the way it does? Why am I using gasoline? Why am I paying taxes to somebody that's, going out of their way to not let me know that because I'm born on this planet, I shouldn't have to pay for a fucking thing. This is my planet. I own just as much as Jeff Bezos does. Just because Jeff Bezos' kid is born to a rich person doesn't mean that they won the lottery. You know what I mean? We're all going to be skeletons when we die. And so it's so important that we start figuring out how to work with each other. I know for me, when I talk to people about UFOs, sometimes there's this like sort of like UFO envy, like, man, I wish I saw that stuff. And, and then I go, well, if you really want to see a UFO, just completely give up on wanting that experience and just start working on yourself spiritually. Really, really fucking hard. And that way you'll be ready. But this whole experience is not about seeing a ship and going, oh, wow, look at that. That's a really pretty flyover. That's cool, that maneuver they just did. No, they're showing up to people for reasons. And it's really important that we understand that this is the biggest thing that has ever happened to humanity. And then it's right at our doorstep. I mean, for crying out loud, it flew over my house. And then I asked Chris Bledsoe about it, and he said, I saw the same thing a week ago. What? And so at first I was like, is he just telling me that? Because it kind of, and then I started thinking about it, and I was like, well, Chris, why did they come by? And he said, they just wanted to say hi. I'm like, wow, they did a flyover. And so like, if people start seeing what I'm seeing and they start having these reactions, it's going to make it really hard for them to want to believe the establishment that they have our best interests at hand, when they're really just concerned with doing better and going to country clubs and, not paying taxes. And right now we have the greatest transfer of wealth in human history, right? All the baby boomers are going out and they're going to transfer to their kids, and all of that's going to be loophole. They're not going to pay a fucking dime. And so it's like, it's crazy, like California should be a state of emergency. Go walk around Los Angeles and tell me that it's not, you know what I mean? And there's all these like contentious issues going on. And we're like worried about, the James Webb telescope taking pictures of things that we've already seen. They won't even zoom into other planets and take pictures. And, so even the established group of scientists and stuff, they've got their dogma. And until that's broken and something does show up and pierce the human consciousness on a level that has never happened, we're going to have a really terrible time. And, the billionaires of this world need to be confronted with that just as much as the poorest people in the world. Because once the machines come into power, they're not going to need us. We won't have the power of the people anymore. It's going to shift. And so this is our time right now to create a revolution and start realizing, hey, we need to think about the future. That's kind of important. And these aliens, they're in the future. And you know what? If they show up in 2027, I'm going to have a huge party and I'm going to be super excited. There's a part of me that's almost kind of jealous of that, thinking like, God, I'd like to just keep this secret. I'd like to keep this relationship the way it is and not have people find out about what I know, because it's like, it's what keeps me going. And it's important that they show up and people fucking see them. They can't hide in the shadows and be assholes anymore running their programs. And the thing that's even more bizarre is that if you listen to PhD, I think it's David Jacobs, he's saying that their mistakes are so low that they must have run this hybridization program before, because the mistakes that they were making 100 years ago are still the mistakes that they're making now, and that it's a very low error. So this is a natural thing that happens in the universe. They came to our ancestors. They fucked with us. Did you know that every single person in the world can be traced to one person in Africa? It's called the Eve.
I think I've heard that. Yeah.
At first they thought it was 5 others, but now they know that it was just one. The human population was so low at that point that that was a bottleneck for us. So if anybody had come along from extraterrestrial species and fucked with that one person, we're all descendants of her. Whatever they're doing, they're being very successful. I know that when I was on the Mesa, I was doing a really beautiful drawing, and I felt like a dwarf came behind the window, and I'm pretty sure it was my extraterrestrial hybrid daughter who was just standing behind me one night. And I was so fucking scared, I didn't even look around. And I know that my wife has had a dream of seeing somebody in one of these hybrid clothing, where it's like a translucent turtleneck. It's kind of like a bodysuit, but it's baggy. She's seen that in her dreams with the spaghetti hair. So that's one of the other telltale signs. So, this human hybrid thing is actually pretty fucking awesome. Because if they really are aliens, then the hybrids are the only ones that could probably really understand us. And it's important for us to get this hybridization program out there and start talking about it. Because there's more people in the future that are going to be taken that will have no fucking clue what's going on, that will deal with all of the confusion like I did, not understand why owls are following them, not understand why these thoughts are coming to them just obscure. There's a whole pattern to this. All of this is part of their plan and makes a lot of sense because they're super successful at what they're doing.
Yeah, and then there's the whole theory too that that we agreed that people who have had experiences agreed before birth to go undergo these hybridization programs, studies, or whatever, but we don't know. Our human minds don't know. We're not aware of it, but our higher selves know. That's one theory. So if that's possible, that, like maybe some people are like freaked out, kicking and screaming, like, no, I didn't agree to this, but maybe their higher self did before they were born.
I would say to that a quote from Dr. Hynek, and he said that this phenomenon is very similar to the unborn communicating with the long past dead. And that there is a spiritual component to this, and that's one of the big missing keys to understanding the phenomenon.
What are your thoughts on CE5?
Are you speaking to the Greer app?
You can use the app or not use the app, but I think the idea is to do a meditation to make contact with the UFOs, and then a lot of people do it, and they'll see something happen in the sky. I just wasn't sure what some people say. Don't do it because you don't know what you're inviting in. I mean, this phenomenon is so big, and there's dark forces and there's light forces, and you don't know what you could be bringing into your energy field.
Well, that's the thing. People have been claiming that they can do that for a long time. I think Bledsoe is probably the best one out there. That Skinwalker Ranch, the new season, episode 2, is pretty unbelievable. I mean, they have, the EEG or whatever it is on his head, right? And he calls up the orb. And
yep.
For me, I don't like Ouija boards. I think they cause a lot of trouble. I don't think people understand what they are. It's sort of like playing with a black hole.
Right.
You never know what's going to come out the other end. People think it's a game. I don't think so. I think things can come out of that and then follow you and cause a lot of harm. I believe there are things out there that are not human as well that can come through that. I would say that when trying to call something up, I use Bledsoe techniques. And so I really, anytime he talks about it in an interview, I get pretty obsessive and try to listen to what he's saying. One of the things that I've gotten from him is that he will start manifesting almost 16 or 18 hours before he wants to see it. And then
you mean meditating?
Praying. Say,
Praying. Okay.
praying.
Got
He
it.
prays. And when he gets to where he's supposed to be, he does not say, hey, I want to have this experience. He says, if there's anybody in the area, I am here. And I think that's a big fundamental difference between people wanting to have an experience versus the actual reality of people in a starship showing up to come and see you, and what the reality of that is and how much work that must take and how expensive that is, more in time than money, right? They don't,
Absolutely.
they're very efficient and they're cheap with their time. So, you know, it's a big open sky. And every time you walk outside, you're actually walking in outer space. There is no such thing as outer space, right? That's sort of a human conception. You're walking outside, you could be 1,000 light years away. And if you could see in the present, right, you could see you. You could see yourself just walking around, right? Or pretty much completely naked. I guess for me, sometimes when I'm calling the UFOs, I feel like I have to play a duality with myself and say, has this already happened? And am I just following something that I've already done before that was the last epochs of the Big Bang? And I'm just going through it again, having amnesia. So I kind of play those games of like, if I think I'm going to call up a UFO, it's because they already decided to be there. And I just think that I'm calling it up. And so when you start thinking about these things can move back and forth in time, it makes me believe that these experiences are already kind of set up for me as events, and that no matter what, it's going to show up regardless of whether I think I'm calling it or not. And I know that with calling up a UFO, when you have friends around, you want to please your friends and be like, hey, I called up the UFO. And so there's a lot of ego involved in that. And the want part needs to just totally fade away and realize that you've got all the green pastures right here. You don't need anything. You don't want to have an experience. But here I am, and if anyone's in the vicinity, come say hi. So
I like that. Yeah.
I tend to look at the same part of the sky when I'm trying to manifest, and trying to really project that, hey, I'm looking at this particular part of the sky. I'm not all over the place. And then that's when it starts to happen. But it never happens as much as I want to. It never happens when I have a phone in my hand. And so I have a lot of anxiety now about even seeing a UFO, because now when I tell somebody and I don't have a picture of it, did the tree fall in the forest if nobody heard it, kind of thing. But I don't think that witnesses need to prove what happens to them. I don't think that's important. I think like spiritually that experience changes you, and that quantumly affects the whole universe.
Agreed. What have you taken away from your experiences?
Well, for the UFO, I didn't make art at all. My father is a master ceramic. He calls himself a ceramic archaeologist, so he can look at like an ancient piece of Mesoamerica, and he can actually make it exactly as the artist made it. I mean, it's amazing. He's like a copy machine. It's a beautiful. And so for me, I hated art because of him. I felt like he left my mother and our whole situation so that he could pursue that. So I destroyed all of my art my whole life. So whenever I've been in an art class and an art teacher will say, hey, can I see your portfolio? And I'm like, I burned it. And they're like, what? Why the fuck would you do that? Like, I don't know if you even know what you're doing. And I'm like, oh, I'm far past that. Well, you need to show me. And so I'll spend all night, making stuff and be like, hey, look. And they're like, well, if you had a portfolio, you wouldn't have had to do all that work. So when I had the UFO contact, I didn't make art. And I had all these learning disabilities. And I'd also been running away from Ben Blakemore my whole life. who was my stepfather, who abused me for 7 years, called me a fucking dumbass, was on my ass all the time. At the end, he was going to kill me and my mother because we were going to leave. He shot a gun out the window and then said that he did that instead of killing us. And I didn't find that out for years later. And I had no idea what had happened. And he passed away 4 or 5 years ago from a heart attack because he drank himself to death because we left. And I know that in my heart. And I had a conversation before he died. And he said, James, I just want to go hunting with you one last time. And then he died. And so I make beautiful art now. I spent hundreds of hours on it. My father seen my artwork and said, James, I could never do this. The level of detail and stuff, he's like, you really like doing this. And he actually has to take a magnifying glass to my work to actually see the detail. Because I spent like 1.5 years on some of these. And the only way that I was able to work through this whole abduction experience was through my art. That it was drawing it out and feeling connected to it. And then I went to Contact in the Desert and I was going to go sell my art, right? And I had one of my friends, Danny, come up from Los Angeles, who's a big fan of mine. And he says, James, the closest I'll ever get to UFOs is hanging out with you. And he shows up to Contact in the Desert and I got all my stuff out there and he goes, James, you don't have any price tags on your stuff. And I went, oh, man. And I don't think that I like giving this stuff away. And so the other takeaway is that because of the UFO experience, I was forced to take Math 0 because I felt like I was supposed to. And I'm sitting in the math class and I was just going to leave because he's going over basic arithmetic. And I run to the class at the end and I say, sir, thank you so much. You're an amazing teacher, but I don't need this class. And he goes, what's 7 times 8? And I'm terrible at math. I'll tell you right now, it's 56. And he said, you know what? You'll remember that for the rest of your life. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, and you're going to take my class. So if it hadn't been for that UFO, I would have never gone back to college and realized just how far I was from actually having a real education. I had to completely re-educate myself, realize I didn't learn a fucking thing in high school and surf the whole time. And then also making amends with Ben Blakemore and realizing that all of that trauma and everything that had happened to me, man, I was lucky to survive all of that. Yeah, and so it also helped me to connect with my mother on a deeper level as well, as I'd always sort of hated her for pulling me through all of that crazy shit. And now my mom actually had an owl in her backyard pick up a bird and fly away. And she saw a bumper sticker later that day, and it had a UFO with a peace sign, and it said, we are always with you. And all of my mom's psychic interpretations come from bumper stickers that she sees when she's driving around, which is really interesting. And so it's really brought me full circle. If it hadn't been for Earl Grey Anderson and MUFON and their ERT team, experiencer team resource group, or whatever that means, I would still say that UFOs are evil and that we should stay the fuck away from them and that they're all cloners. And if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing this. And he helped me to realize that there's a real positive aspect about this, and that people, if I tell my story, it could save a life. It could save somebody from committing suicide, or somebody that's had this happen to them, because how are you supposed to deal with this unless other people talk about it?
It's so important. It's so important to be able to share your experience, because there is someone out there that's going to watch this and they need to hear it. And so thank you so much for coming on and spending a good 1.5 hours with me. And if people are interested in finding you, are you open to that?
I am. I'm currently working on a memoir right now called UFO Surfer, and it should be coming out this summer. I got a great editor. And since I've been sitting on this story for so long, I feel like it's my duty to whoever has come to me to give it my best shot possible and just put it all out there and not hold anything back.
Where can people find you?
You can find me on social media at UFO Surfer, UFO_surfer.
Is that Instagram?
Yep, you can find me on Instagram, and you can also find me UFOsurfer.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, James. It's been such a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And I really like what you're doing and appreciate that you're interested in this, because if something does happen in 2025, 27, it's going to be huge, and that all of this stuff's going to be even more relevant than it ever was before.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means the world to me, and I will see you in the next video.